Yeah, I want to say hi to Eric too. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Eric. Bruce, you want to say hello to Eric?
Hey, Eric.
Ralph?
Thanks for joining us. Eric, get off my lawn.
There you go. Sparky 107 wants to know how can he get to watch a modeler's life or listen to a modeler's life? How can
if he goes to amodelerslife.com, there's links there to the free site, which is Libsyn and iTunes, and there's other. You can get it on Google Play. He can get it on TuneIn and Spotify. But if he goes to the website, amodelerslife.com, there's links right there.
Zappa Gap.
Yeah. It's a CA type glue. Kevin said Flexifile plastic weld. And Ron was saying MEK.
No, I can use. No, I can weld with acetone. That works. It's beautiful. But I can't print this job in ABS. It has to be PLA.
So what I have here is, you'll see that I've got 9 different LEDs on here, and they're just kind of slowly changing. One comes on, one comes off. You know, it's kind of a slow pace, and we could sit here all night watching this very slowly go. But you know, if you actually had these in windows in your different buildings, or even one in each different building, it doesn't even have to be windows in the same building, then you'd want it to go this slow or maybe even slower. And that's about the only thing I'm going to have to show you in the sketch. So we're going to go back to that real quick. Or actually, let's build this thing first. So I just put it together so that you could see what we're going to end up doing. And what I'm going to do is just unplug my Arduino and tear this thing apart real quick.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Well, see, we got a bunch of people coming in. I guess I need to turn my camera on, don't I? Huh. How's everybody doing?
No complaints.
Yeah, see, we got Andy, Jason. Tim's in here. He's back yonder working on a layout for his dad, doing the framework.
Oh, that's cool. Got a little in-scale layout, right? I thought so. That's cool.
Yeah, I'll fake him out, put a C-scale on there, tell him he needs new glasses. Yeah, we're getting some people in over here. We got Dave Piper, Ari, John, Kyles, Michael. Get the scroll bar over here. Let's see who else we got. Hastings and John, Kay, Dwight, Touch of the Brush, Mall Railroad, Mall Weathering. He's playing his band tonight, so he won't be doing a whole lot, but that's okay. Hey, Robert.
That's a whole lot. You can have that tour all late night and stuff. I've done that business.
Yeah. Robert said, I'm glad to see Andy got rid of the mohawk.
It wasn't that appealing to me, and I'm not going to be popping on a live broadcast show. I'm not letting anybody record or take pictures of that funniness. It was funny to let people laugh at me for an evening, but we're not doing anything live like that.
Yeah, Brian just popped in.
My wife's telling me she has a picture of it, but I don't know how she caught me for that.
You probably wasn't paying any attention.
Stacy's saving it for blackmail.
Yeah.
That part makes sense to me.
Hey, Lord, thought you was going to bed so you get up and take that trip tomorrow. Hot Rod Rodney. How's it going? Well, it seemed like Big Bill and Ralph had a pretty good show last night.
Absolutely.
And for those who didn't hear, there's next week, the only show we've got, because we got 5 weeks in this month, will be another Mall Train Talk show. Bill's almost got me saying it the way he does. But, yeah, I won't be hosting next week. We got a special guest, and as Bill was saying, Andy finally got all the paperwork done up late last night, and between our people and their people, and so there's going to be a different host next week. Hey, Phil, how you doing? Phil Wyman just popped in.
Well, hey, Phil. Good to see you around, buddy. Yeah, all that interorganizational and broadcasting company PR work and the political work with their PR people and such. It was a bit tedious there for a while, but we ended up working it out.
Yeah. What you doing in here, Lord? You're supposed to be getting ready for your trip.
I'm pretty well ready. I just have to get up tomorrow morning. That's all.
So you're going to stay up late tonight, huh?
Yeah, it's no use. I could go to bed and I'll just keep on thinking about my layout and I'll just stay awake. But might as well just stay up, get tired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tend to go to sleep all I want. Short of some Benadryl or something, it doesn't work for me either.
I still worked on my little winter scene. I've got 2 guys skiing, put in a tree, more bushes. So I made a little video if you guys want to go watch it. It's on Facebook, on our Facebook.
Cool. Yeah, I'll go do that. I really enjoy catching up with this winter stuff. I'm fascinated with the winter scenery, especially.
Oh, you want to share it? If you...
Yeah, he used pastel powders.
Yeah. I think it's only a minute long.
Yeah, let's see it.
Yeah,
That'd be really good. Yeah.
Pop it up here.
I thought you were going to share it.
I can't do that. I have to pre-record it.
I can get it up. It'll take me a minute, though, so you guys talk amongst yourself.
Okay. No, I still have lots to do on it. Well, lots, not really. I still have to finish that roof on that hydrocal building. I still have to do that porch. And a few things I have to do. I want to put electric pole, we call it utility pole. That's hooked up to the building, but the wires are cut. And then once that's done, then I'll just throw the snow on top. So it was really a good practice run for my winter scene for my layout.
You did a good job of weathering those buildings and modifying that one.
How big an area on your layout, speaking of that, how big of an area on your layout is going to be covered by that winter?
A quarter.
I thought so.
There's 4 seasons, so it's going to be a quarter.
Hey, I stayed at 4 seasons once. Right.
I used to listen to the 4 seasons. Alright, here's the video. Can I make it bigger? No, I can't. You want to hide your share button, bar? Yeah, I got the skiers out.
Yeah, that old road is being used for that.
Okay, that looked pretty good. Oh yeah, you did get some more of those bushes. Yeah, we'll talk about how you made those here in a minute because I think everybody will be fascinated by that. They really look good.
I like the way you got the snow stuck in the fence, or at least that's what it looked like.
Right, yeah, I see that too, yeah, where the dust is stuck to it. It is very realistic. Wait. Oh yeah, that's very cool. Very, very cool, brother.
Thank you. Oh, that's my 2 hobos next.
Yeah, and I probably need to pay more attention to my Facebook notifications than I do. I don't. When I get on Facebook, I get lost with all of our fellow, all of our model railroading stuff that everybody posts. But how long ago was that? Oh, what about the go? That's not bad. That's still better than looking at me. So it is fascinating. So you made those bushes with. You want to tell us how you done that? Because you used
a mix. I used the Spanish moss, which you could get at, well, we call it a dollar store. So it's Spanish moss, and what I did is I put in the, what was that? Sage, not sagebush, but
yeah, the super tree material. There's a name for that. I'll think of it in a minute. But the super tree material.
Yeah, the super tree material, I just shoved it into the moss, so it really looks like a bush. it's like you're able to see through, but yeah. And it looks good for autumn. I didn't try it with the leaves to see what kind of results I would get.
When I did that thing I was showing you, where the vines that I made, I used that same basic material that Spanish moss pulled into strings, but I used it. In my case, I used it with polyfill or whatever that stuff's called, the woodland scenics stuff, and spray bombed it, and I leafed it as like vines growing up a tree. And I like the effect in that case, but it's not meant to recreate, nor does it recreate bushes as well as what you've done. I need to try it that way too.
Yeah, Phil said it looks good, Lord.
Pardon?
Phil said it looks good, Lord. You got to refresh, Andy, when the video's over.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Jaffa down there in Australia, he said there's only 2 seasons in Oz, hot and cold. It ain't obviously 4 like in the U.S. Hey, Ralph.
Yeah, howdy.
Hey, Ralph.
How is everyone tonight?
They're doing good.
This is a good thing.
Why don't I look okay? I'm doing fine. What are you up to?
Very little.
Congratulations. Proud of you. Everybody needs that from time to time.
I've been rushing around all day today trying to readdress my email addresses because I'm changing internet providers. So everyone that sends me email, all these companies and so on, and going out because I have accounts with them, going out, and it's a pain in the rear end to try and find where the email is stored so you can change it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Big Bill put in here, I was in touch with that person who is hosting the show next week. Actually, I was talking to his people. Then he goes, he wants to know if we supply him with M&M candies.
Yeah. I replied back to, I was just telling the only thing we have to do, we just have to make sure we have to remove the green M&M so that we're compliant with the rider contract. Have you guys ever heard that story before? That was the Beatles. See, people have had rider contracts on music acts for many years before the Beatles come along, of course, in the industry. But the Beatles, being mischievous kids that they were, wanted to make it to where they could never be in trouble if something happened with the contract. So they immediately made the booking company out of contract compliance. They would write little weird oddities into their rider contract. So as long as they signed that contract for booking the Beatles to come there, if they had great M&Ms, they were out of contract. They could not sue the Beatles for being out of compliance. That's where that originates from. Now everybody says that no great M&Ms. It become an expression anymore. It all comes from that Beatles history.
Ralph Dwight wants to know, shall I delete your email addresses?
Oh, you can keep it if you want. May not get you much. By the end of this week, it'll be useless, so.
Yeah, Bill said he drew a line in the sand with the limo service, so the guys having to take Uber to the YTMB headquarters.
And what was the Uber driver like? That's usually a big issue.
You'll find out next week.
I've heard a few horror stories about Uber drivers, but I haven't done it you know, maybe 40 or 50 times, but I've always had spectacular experience with Uber. I'm a big fan. But I have heard some horror stories.
Yeah.
There are obviously.
Well, you did have that one that didn't want to let you out of the vehicle.
I mean, there's a little weirdness with some of them. I mean, they're regular people, but.
Yeah, that was up there in Indianapolis when we went to the show up there.
Yeah, that was the best way to do that show. That was a perfect arrangement. The next show we go to, we've got to try to get one again that close, like we did last time. We were so close to the show, to the convention.
Yeah, next one's what, St. Louis in August?
Yeah, next year, 2020.
No, this year.
Oh well, no, that's the RPM meet.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah,
yeah,
RPM.
St. Louis.
Louis next year is in 2020 is the national at the place. St. Louis is the city that the NMRA National started in. It was where it started, and they come to St. Louis every 10 years on cycle. That should be a pretty good show, especially with the RPM show and the national being there next year. St. Louis will be really good in 2020 for anybody who could come down and join us for that show. That would be great. But the RPM show in St. Louis is RPM shows, I think, are the future of the hobby, generally speaking. I think they represent a big portion of the future of the hobby. You see a lot of the quote-unquote younger guys, mid-30s and 40s, that are getting back into the hobby again. The RPM shows tend to be one of their entry points back into the hobby. I think they represent where the hobby's heading, to more prototype and prototypical fidelity modeling, weathering and these kind of things that are drawing particular interest these days. The RPM shows are sweet for that. And there's two RPM shows. There's three, but there's two that the Chicagoland RPM meet and the St. Louis RPM meet are supposedly particularly good. The Western Prototype Modelers meet's okay, and the MARPA meet, the Mid-Atlantic RPM, is supposed to be pretty decent too, but Chicagoland and St. Louis normally get the widest appeal, so to speak, on the internet, people say.
Tim, Brad wants to know if you can move your camera closer. Okay, he wants to be able to see a little better what you're doing.
Not really. It's hang on a second, I might go here.
Or just move that wood layout out of the way, move that layout over there.
Yeah.
You got a hammer and a saw there. I know you can facilitate this.
Just mute your mic when you do it.
Yeah, we'll move the HO layout out of the way, and we'll put the end scale right in front of it.
Did you guys see Rapido's release announcement today for the U-boat U-36B? I think.
No, I missed that.
Some kind of spectacular looking. I commented on it, and then whoever's running their YouTube channel replied back to my comment on their YouTube channel about it from Rapido. And of course, like everything else, and like I'm saying, look at all the stuff we talk about in the hobby these days, from the scale trade stuff and the really high-end modeling to the weathering, etc. Rapido trades as much as anybody with these road name specific and era specific detailing. So they're making like a whole bunch of different versions of that locomotive, just like they did recently with their RS-11. They come out with all these different versions, and they've got the version that has the correct roof details and air conditioning units and such for the Santa Fe unit, and they've got the Southern unit with its particular unique details. It even comes with the details that modify it for the late versus the early era. So you could model it in the Southern tuxedo paint, which they sell it in as well, or are going to be selling it in, I'm assuming. They didn't have the demo paint jobs for that one yet. They just had the Conrail, the Santa Fe. And you model it late, just before the NS merger. So if you were modeling after the NS merger, you could modify that piece that hangs off the rear handrail for the late era, the NS period. And they've got it in Southern Pacific livery with the offset headlight high on the nose. It's a really, really, really good looking model. I like the RS-11 as good as anything I've ever seen them do. But I'm a big fan of U-boats and Alcos in general. So the U-boat and the RS-11 are both really nice from Rapido. See if I can find you a picture of it, because it's good.
Is that closer?
Yeah, that looks good.
I'm on their website now, Andy. I don't see anything.
Well, just a second. I have too, but just a second. I'll find it for you. 'Cause it was
Probably on
YouTube.
Facebook.
Yeah, it was a YouTube video that they announced, but I'll. But just recently they come out with that RS-11. Oh, there it is, B-36-7, GE B-36-7. It's not a U-boat. Never mind. I guess that's what it is.
I'll put it up anyway.
I will. Because they dropped a YouTube video about it. Let's see which one it was. Yeah, it was the GE. It's not a U-boat. It's the B-36-7, 36-7, and but it's my second favorite. Of course, I love my 1950 era that I'm modeling, and the big heavy steam at the late model steam, big heavy articulateds. But my second favorite era to model would be that 1984, 1985 period when all the railroads were merging together. And you see all these mixed paint jobs. You see on the CSX, you see these, these seaboard systems and family line systems, B&O, C&O, chassis system, which is a beautiful paint scheme, the chassis paint scheme, and the early CSX paint jobs. You see all those. You see consists of all those mixed livery locomotives. It's a beautiful era, that 84, 85 period. And there's so many really cool locomotives because you had a lot of Alcos that were around at that time. And the U-boats. I really like U-boats. See, that's that tuxedo, southern tuxedo paint scheme that's so famous, the black and gold lettering.
Further down, it's got all the PDFs of all the road names. That's an interesting one there.
Yeah, Trans Kentucky. Yeah, Trans Kentucky Transportation. Yeah, that's what I thought. But then a really nice, it'd be really worth looking at. Watch that YouTube video that they dropped about it with all the different prototype specific details. My favorite thing that Rapido has produced so far is this RS-11, I think. Which I'm an Alco fanboy, but
you should see, go further down. You should see the detail of the control stand.
All right, let's go look at that. So I think this proves that the prototype modelers have taken over the hobby, which I'm a fan of, obviously. But because look at where all the money is at in the hobby. All the high-end vendors are making these things, and they're selling them. Obviously, they're selling them.
Just below that. There you go.
Oh, that's pretty. Oh yeah! Wow, interior detailing. Really, really nice interior detailing.
Tim Brad said thanks for moving the camera.
And the links that Rapido goes to, 3D scanning all this stuff, all the cabling and the wiring and hoses that they put in, all that cabling that's in for the prototype. Yeah, I thought that was a Southern. Southern used this high nose on the short hood, but the Southern run them all long nose forward. So they run, yeah, just all long nose forward. They're all set up that way. They had their control stands are all flipped in the opposite direction on NS and Southern prototypes. They did the same thing for that RS-11 though, and they also have they went to as much excessive detail on all these locomotives, the FPBs. Well, they don't have a good picture of the actual locomotive though. Anyway, it's amazing what these companies are doing, and it's working and it's selling. That's the attention in the hobby.
CPR Train says Rapido Canadian is the best thing that they have ever made. And the Royal Hudson will be the finest steam locomotive ever made in HO. A little correction to that. The finest steam locomotive ever made in plastic.
Yeah, you'd have to narrow out the really expensive stuff, the brass.
It's a hybrid, actually, because it's got photo etched brass on it.
It is brass detail parts. A lot of things would meet that qualification of brass detail parts. I think to call a locomotive brass or even hybrid, some of the big structural components need to be made of brass. Either, I mean, you could get away with a plastic or styrene boiler, for example, but there needs to be some primary components that are brass, I think.
Did you see that comment from Brad, Ralph? About the fascia?
Can you explain the fascia? I think he touched on it last night. I did, actually. I have so many bridges on my layout that what I've done is I took masonite and it's done to look like plate girder bridge. So you have the ribbon that they usually have on the steel, which basically is a washer plate for the rivets, and the rivet heads are what do they call them?
Button plugs.
Carpentry. The button plugs, mushroom plugs, to hide screws, to make them look like rivets because they have the nice round head on them. So I've made this trim here. It's all over the place. It's all 1 inch, and I've painted it green. And as you can see behind me here, this part here I've already given it some weathering on the fascia to look like it's rusty. I have to add some more at the rivet points. But that's basically the idea, was to make the fascia look like plate girder bridge.
Mm-hmm. Looks good too. Joe G, he said he's been looking for a SW interior and have had no luck.
Has he looked on Shapeways? Because there's a lot of interior components built just like the way Rapido's doing that on Shapeways.
Michael Connolly says, Andy, what do you think about Bowser locos for detail and operation?
Oh, I think the way they run is spectacular, and Bowser has, at least the newest stuff out, has ESU loc sound decoders in them. They're stellar. I think you need to add a few detail parts to them. I mean, to get them right, I think they're a little light on detail compared to Rapido or Scale Trade's higher end stuff. But I mean, $20, you know, a couple hours of your time. A Bowser locomotive is everything you get out of the others for a little less money with a loc sound decoder built in. So,
and Intermountain is similar to Bowser.
They are. Intermountain's pretty good. Intermountain's had a few hits and actually they've had a lot of hits, and they've had some misses as well. Intermountain had some serious QA problems with manufacturing a couple years back, and I'm not sure they're completely over that yet, where they were having quite a few DOAs. So there's a little bit of QA concern with them. Of course, they're replacing ones that you get that are bad, but that's a little disappointing when you've got a $300 locomotive in and it's dead on arrival.
Right.
That hurts, but you know, our industry always suffers on the manufacturing side a bit. We don't have a high enough volume for the correct manufacturing per se generally. That's why I think it's so amazing that Rapido and Scale Trades have moved ahead of the pack so well with the level of attention that they're putting into it. It's something that I think Bowser, Intermountain MTH, none of these companies do in the way that Rapido and Scale Trades both do, is the prototype differentiation. So when you order a Santa Fe or a Norfolk Southern or Louisville Nashville locomotive from Rapido or somewhere else, it'll have the prototype details accurate for that locomotive. It'll have firecracker antennas if they had it. It'll have the right plows. It'll have the right details on top of the cab. It will be interior set up for long hood running or short hood running. Most of these companies get the big picture stuff right, like Bowser gets the big picture stuff right. But you need, if you're going to buy a Bowser and you care about those particular details. Not everybody does. You don't have to care about it to enjoy this stuff, but I do. And for those of us who care, you've got to get online, find a picture of the prototype, buy a handful of detail parts, and put them on. Nothing wrong with that. It's not expensive, and it's an enjoyable part of the hobby to participate in. So I like Bowser. Intermountain I'm a little wary of, but I would still buy them.
Rock Island 652 said Athearn put a great SW interior in the SW 1500. Would be nice available separately. The interesting part is if the locomotive is still available, you can probably order the parts through their parts department.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes even if they're not available, they'll still have, if it was recently available, they'll still keep parts around for it. I think Athearn makes spectacular stuff. If I bought an Athearn locomotive, I would buy the DC version, though. I'm pretty stuck on Loke Sound. The Athearn stuff's still using Tsunami 2s now, right?
I'm not sure.
Full Throttle was a cincher for me. Not that I wasn't already kind of there with ESU anyway, just due to sound quality and overall motor control functions and stuff on the Loke Sound. They're just leaps and bounds ahead of anybody else in decoders. Now, 2 years ago, I would have said TCS had the steam market and Loke Sound had the diesel market on lockdown. But I think they've leaped ahead pretty well with steam, even though they don't have enough sound effects. I'm going to put Loke Sounds in my couple Broadway Limited locomotives, but I'm going to have to deal with creating custom sounds for them. But the Full Throttle configuration set for ESU, especially if you have a small layout and or a switching layout of any kind, that Full Throttle set of sound effects is just to die for. Incredible. See, the way these locomotives run, the way the sound effects happen on a Tsunami 2 or TCS or any other decoder is not the way a prototype engine is run. They don't, as you speed up your model locomotive, it goes notch 1, notch 2, notch 3, notch 4. That's not how the prototype runs a locomotive. They kick it up into notch 8, they pull up a little power, everything starts moving, they drop it back into neutral, and they coast along and tap the brake before they make the knuckle. And that's not how these sound decoders work. But with an ESU and drive hold, as either drive hold independently or as part of the Full Throttle feature set, that's exactly how the thing sounds.
On the Athearn part we talked about a while ago, your best bet is to email or contact them. Don't check the Horizon Hobby website. It won't necessarily tell you everything they have in stock.
No, but the thing is, you want to have part numbers. So somehow you have to get a hold of the exploded drawing to get the part numbers.
You should be able to get that off their website. You may have to click discontinued models, but you should still be able to get that off their website.
Yeah,
I did that for those Dash 8s that I've got, or the Dash 9s.
They're pretty supportive of that. I am a fan of Athearn as a company. I just don't like the decoder. I like the locomotives. I just don't like the decoder. Not a big deal.
I was able to get a hold of them and get the detail parts and new windshields and everything for these Dash 9s. Because some of them are Mission windshields and the lighting assemblies and stuff like that. I was able to get a hold of Athearn, and they had them in stock in They're China factory. They didn't have them here in the warehouse. But they had them in stock in China. So it took me a little while to get them. But they did have it. And they produced the Dash 9s I've got for several years.
Rock Island 652 says prototype engines don't have a drive hold button. No question about that. Drive hold or the full throttle feature set is not title and description accurate for how a prototype locomotive works. That's just their naming conventions for these functions. But it's about how a real locomotive, not even as much how a real locomotive operates, how a real prototype engineer operates a real locomotive. They don't do this notch 1, notch 2, notch 3, notch 4. They move all through the notches, just like skipping gears in a car. Very, very, very often. And also, with most decoders, you can't coast with the engine still pulling along because our locomotives do not coast, or very few. Some brass locomotives have some clutch capabilities in their drivetrain. But so it's not meant to recreate it from a name perspective, but you as an operator can recreate the effects of putting a locomotive into neutral while it still pulls along at 15 miles an hour. Or for me, on a helper grade, I can put my locomotive at, now there's steam locomotives, so there's not notches there, but the locomotive can be absolutely screaming. Everything the locomotive can dish out, yet when it comes across the top of the summit at 2.26% grade, that it's on its knees at 5 miles an hour. But the locomotive's just absolutely giving it everything it can do. That's really hard to recreate unless, now, Tsunami does have a feature that may be what you're talking about with the DDE. Actually, I'm interested in what that particular feature is, the DDE. But that, direct digital exhaust. I know what you're talking about. That, there's a weird problem with controlling sound effects. There is a way with Tsunami 2s only, and only recently, that you can segment the sound, manual sound notching. It's a little bit tedious to manipulate from what I've heard. There are people who are doing it, but you have to control the sound via function buttons independently of the locomotion control. And the only way that you can reconnect the sound, say you're climbing a grade, and when you get to the top, you want the sound and drive speed to go back to correlation. The only way to put those back into correlation with the Tsunami 2 decoder is to bring the locomotive to a stop and then recorrelate those to go on down the track. At least that's what I've seen on YouTube talking about it. With ESU, you can just kick that in and out of functionality all the time. So as you're climbing a grade, you can kick it up to notch 8 or put the drive hold on, making it stay at a certain speed, and then crank the throttle up, and it stays at that same speed. Especially with back EMF, it'll maintain that speed. Crank the throttle up, and the sound effects go to full blast.
Yeah, real quick, Joe G, John Dilly just put the part number in for the SW1500 interior G66031.
Perfect. Call up the parts department and place the order.
On that drive
Say
home,
goodnight, guys, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right, Lloyd, you have a good trip. Have fun.
Yes, sir.
that drive home.
Safe travels.
Don't forget to shovel the snow before you leave.
Don't worry. Bye.
On the layout, that is.
Yeah.
That drive hold feature, you can also turn it on at start, have it turned on, throttle the locomotive all the way up to make it sound like it's really trying to start to pull the train on a takeoff, and then you unlatch drive hold or turn it off, and the locomotive will start to match the speed to the throttle.
Right, you can kick it in and out of functionality. When you want them to be in synchronous with each other, when you want the locomotion or motor control and the sound effects to be in sync, you can just kick the drive hold off. You're right, and it won't just go back to its sync; it'll drift back to its sync, prototypical way. But then you could kick it in and out all the time. Manual notching was great a couple years ago when that's all we had, and that was a good step up. It gave us features, to recreate certain effects that we couldn't recreate before. But boy, I think ESU just nailed the full throttle feature set, and I followed that before it was a released feature set configuration from ESU. It was Mike Confalone who was doing it manually. He was turning off dynamic braking functions on his locomotives, because I guess his locomotives on the prototype didn't have dynamic braking. What he was doing was muting the dynamic brake sound effect so it didn't make any sounds, and using the dynamic brake sound effects to cause the locomotive into notch 8 sound effect wise while keeping the speed low. And Matt Herman from ESU fame, while visiting his layout, seen that, was so fascinated by it. Apparently him and the German engineers figured a way to make that as an interesting product and put that out for all of us to use.
Michael Abitino has up here, hey guys, just joined in. He has a question. Has anyone ever scratch built a structure using foam core? And if you can, should I cover it with styrene or just paint?
Just paint.
Hey Bob, how you doing?
Good.
Now
Depends
that I
on
can get a word.
how good of a job you did with the foam core.
Yeah. You should peel the paper off one side of the foam core so you can use the foam to put any lines in, like brick lines. Depends on what scale you're at, but you can do all those things and then just paint it with painter's acrylic quality. That way it doesn't shrink.
And paper. Miles does a bunch of his, of course, many of his are Citra, which is foam core. It's just a plastic or a styrene style of surface on the foam core as opposed to paper. But he uses, they're pretty, he's having somebody print directly on the Citra, but you can take printed brick texture material, and how much better weathering and appearance could you possibly get than a picture of the prototype scaled down? Of course, you need to manipulate that some, cut the windows out, correct windows, they didn't give it some 3 dimension.
Yeah.
Going back to your lockdown ESU, this weekend they'll be demonstrating their new Locksound 5.
I'm really fascinated for that.
This thing is it's really interesting. It has a 32-bit microcontroller on it, and you can play 10 simultaneous sound channels. Not like one stops for one sound and then starts another sound. They play over on top of each other. 16-bit resolution.
Yes, CD quality audio, which is pretty good considering the size of speakers we're dishing out. I can't imagine you needing a higher fidelity sound. Consider the little sugar cube speakers, little speakerphone, or speakerphone off an iPhone speakers. I mean, I think TCS and Tsunami too. I think the best thing that could happen would be for those companies to be competitive again. It's not like I'm a complete buy into ESU. I'd love to see Tsunami and TCS be valued competitors in the market. I think ESU outright run off and left them about a year ago, just in a significant way. Right at the time that Tsunami released their most recent product, ESU just flat run off with it. That's a personal opinion, obviously, but I think it would be. I think it's in our as hobbyists' best interest if the Tsunami product would, if they would go ahead and push a Tsunami 3 out or whatever it would require to get feature parity to ESU products, and especially with regard to TCS, because they have some of the best sound effects in the Steam world. And I think TCS, short of a couple features, TCS had the best decoder in Steam, with the notable exception of missing some of these really fancy new features that aren't appealing to everyone. But I fell in love with that drive hole capability and that full throttle feature set. And whatever's in these Broadway Limiteds, I am not at all a fan of those. It used to be QSI, but it's not. Mine's a Paragon. Mine are Paragon. The couple I've got are Paragon 2. I'm not sure who actually made them for Broadway.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's making them.
Who's loaded up sounds in.
All right, Bill, go ahead. Bill said he had a question.
Yep. And Broadway Limited's run really well, and they've got the sound is pretty good. There's nothing you can do with them.
Yeah, I've noticed some decoders just kind of don't listen to my DCC. I got to be real careful slowing down my AC 6000, because if I slow it down too fast, the thing just takes off. It says, "Oh, you want me to go faster instead of slowing down?" You'll just run away. You'll just take off, and then all of a sudden it realizes, "Wait a minute, I should stop." Because
I had a problem with the Digitrax encoder. It wants to take off whenever I send the command to another engine every now and then.
I think Digitrax makes an okay product as a, in the technology world, we call it a reference design. I'm sure that's not uncommon in other worlds too. So I think Digitrax makes a good reference design for a decoder. And for an economy decoder, they're not awful per se. But when you have Tsunami 2 decoders, or even economies rather, and you can buy load pallets from ESU for $25 that are stellar mechanization. I can't see the reason for Digitrax even making a decoder anymore if all they're going to do is what they're currently doing.
So I'm going to change the subject here a little bit. Bill has a question. He wants to know if he's going to. He may not be nailing his track down. Should I decide not to glue my track down, would you recommend nailing it down? And instead of placing the nails in the center of the ties, would you place them on the outside? Well, I would definitely place them on the outside. By putting them in the center, if you push it down too far, it brings the rails in, because it bows the tie.
Yeah, I mean, you want to use spikes, not nails, and I'll show you where we put them.
Oh, I can't use a 6-penny nail.
No.
Is he redoing his layout or something, or what?
Yeah, he's doing
a section
part
of it. A section of it.
What we used to do at the Modular Club, Knoxville Area Model Railroaders, those were some of the most proficient modelers I'd ever worked with in my life. They would cut the spike detail off of the spike outside here, just set the track down, cut that spike detail off, and cut that spike detail off, and then run a spike down, a spike down there, microengineering or otherwise. For most people, I think the Walthers spikes are the best spikes. They're a good compromise in a smaller spike head detail where the microengineering spikes. I love microengineering products, but their spikes are exotically, massively oversized. I mean, the heads on them are roughly a foot in scale dimensions. It's exotically oversized. But run a spike on the outside of that tie, on either side, and do that every 10 or 12 ties. And that's what the Modular Club did for all the track they laid.
But you end up with the same issue as putting the spike on the inside, like down the middle. If you do it only on the outside, your ties are going to start to do this because you're pulling it down on the outside. They're going to start to open up, so they're going to go out of gauge.
Yeah, if you over tighten it, yes.
Right. So if you over tighten it, to me personally, I would use a latex caulking and just spread it out with a spatula and set your track down and use some pins to hold it in place until the caulking's dry. And the caulking is easy to lift it up later because it remains flexible.
Yeah, he's relighted his double slip switch, so I could understand the point in that particular application. I would agree that caulk is the best way at this point in time with the current techniques that people have developed. I think caulk is the best way to lay flex track or standard track. For a turnout, I am inclined to say that spiking a turnout down and you only need to spike a couple spots on a turnout for it to be adequate. The turnouts want to come up in the middle because of the curvature of the stock rails for the diverging route. That curvature in those wants to force the turnout to spring up in the middle. So if you spike some across the center of the turnout, a couple on either side of the outside stock rails.
The guardrails.
Yeah, right on the other side of the guardrails, outside the stock rails, on the outside of the turnout, at or about the frog. You typically cover. Also, turnouts tend not to be actually straight. Through the straight routes, because the curvature is pulling them off a little bit. So when you have that straight rail and you've got the stock rail, it'll want to pull that turnout a bit and make it a little bit more like a Y. So you've got to pull it back into straight, into true straight, or true tangent in railroad speak. And I am a fan of spiking that sucker down.
I just use silicone cone.
I absolutely
The clear.
Yep.
I was using the clear.
And just don't put caulk under where your throw bar is for most commercial turnout.
I wouldn't put any caulking underneath the switches at all.
Yeah.
So he's got his switches free floating.
He's got them free floating now, and he was able to take them out with no problem. And that's what you want to do if one goes bad. You want to be able to take it out without any problem. Just move your joiners back and pull the. I mean, you can still spike it, but don't glue it down.
Okay, how are you going to ballast a turnout then? Just don't ballast. And if you don't ballast the turnout, don't ballast any of the rest of the track either. The difference in that is going to be a problem. So if you're going to do that, you probably need to be using like Pico's ballast integrated road bed or something.
No, you can put a piece of wax paper underneath it and go through the same process so that when you put your ballast down and you glue it, it doesn't glue to your base. It only goes as far as the wax paper.
And I've seen that as well.
Andy, you need to refresh.
If you do ballast it, you can always come back with alcohol, and it will break the glue back down. If you're just using the like the scenic cement to glue your ballast, you can come back in with the alcohol, soak your turnout down, and then come back in. You can take a wire brush and brush your ballast back off.
Yeah, Bill said he's done what Ralph just said about putting the wax paper down, I guess. So it works great.
Probably ought to do that everywhere, but I mean, I suppose if you one of the things I don't see people do that I think would be one of the greatest recommendations anybody could make is to paint their cork if they put cork down or whatever they're going to do and seal it so that it does not absorb. If you're using cork, in his case, he's using Homosote. It's another reason why spikes would work really good in Bill's case, because Homosote, the reason we use Homosote is because of how it holds spikes and sound deadening properties. And cork does a really horrible job of holding spikes. But most modelers absolutely defeat every purpose they have for putting cork down. They put cork down, put ballast down, and soak the cork with glue. It gets as hard as a board. You might as well put your track directly onto wood roadbed.
Well, it's not quite that bad.
Now, if you seal it with latex, if you put a good, cheap, but good coat of latex house paint down on it first and seal it.
Pretty much doing that if you coat it with Rust-Oleum to give it the weathered rail look.
Maybe I don't know if that would. I'm not sure if that would seal the cork enough to keep it from getting harder.
Yeah, it would.
That'd be a good test.
It's an enamel paint.
Yeah, boy, it's a lot of paint you're putting on compared to a latex paint that puts a rubber seal over top of the cork effectively. Whereas with spraying down an enamel, if you put a thick coat down, it'd be a good experiment. I may take a piece of cork and try to do that.
Have it ready by next Thursday.
Well, I'd like to buy some cork. There's no, there's no cork here. There's no cork in the
I got a ton of cork underneath my desk.
But I quit using cork when
Listen, if cork absorbed all the glue that you're saying, they would not be using cork in wine bottles because it would leak out, and it doesn't. The same cork, it's just ground up. That's all it is.
The cork in a wine bottle is a pretty tough cork. It's more like a cork flooring.
It's the same cork.
Yeah, it's the same cork.
Well, I mean, cork is cork. I'll grant you that. But my business partner put cork in his house. I assure you, it's not the same cork as Midwest roadbed cork. Because that cork is as hard as a board. It's cork board material.
That's because it has a board on top of the cork.
I'll grant you it all comes from the same tree. I'm not arguing that it's not.
It's all it is bark.
But Midwest cork roadbed is not just cork. It's cork particulate glued together with some material, with whatever flexible glue they can do to make that flexible. If cork roadbed, Midwest cork roadbed, was cork wood, it would not be flexible like that. It would not have that rubber
mixed in with it.
Yep, and those particulates allow the glue to soak down between those particulates, the aggregate of that, and that glue sets it up hard as that. I used cork when I was a kid for years and years. When I was 14 or 15, I quit using cork, and I couldn't imagine going back to cork now. But I ballasted cork before, and every time I ever pulled anything up, and everybody I've ever heard talk about pulling cork up, it's hard as a rock when you go to pull it up.
The surface is, because that's where the glue stops.
Well,
and that's doing the same thing. You do the same thing when you paint the top of it. You make the top hard.
The reason why your cork hardens a lot of times is because it dries out. Not because of the glue penetration, it's because it dries out. And if I remember correctly, there was like on the instructions on the box, I think it said something about don't get water before you lay it down.
Saw that too, Ralph.
Yeah, I did. Shall I read Robert's comment? Why are we arguing about cork? I mean, there are better things to argue about. I mean, yeah, there's better things, more important things to argue about, like freelance versus prototype, or how crazy Andy really is.
Rivet counter or not a rivet counter?
No point in arguing about freelance or prototype. There actually is cork. There is not a prototype or a freelance modeler. Those words are useless in model railroading. I despise the use of those words in model railroading. Because
are you saying you despise me?
No, I despise those words.
I'm a freelancer.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
No,
we all are.
No. What locomotives do you have? Is there a prototype?
Whatever's available.
That based on some prototype. So
But I'm not talking about the locomotives. I'm talking about my layout. It's freelance.
Okay, so did you pick some different gauge for your rail, or are you doing something that are you doing anything that a real railroad wouldn't do?
You're nitpicking now, buddy.
That's
not an argument.
I got to change the tape. Y'all hang on a sec. I got to change the tape on the tape recorder. You only put in a 1 hour reel. I tell you what, Michael has asked a question earlier, and he's trying to get an answer. So he was wanting to know, did Andy use grout for his ballast, and I guess how did you lay it down?
Yeah, I use grout, just unsanded grout or sanded grout in a lot of cases for doing gravel because of how small a size it is. And if I was modeling it in scale, I would use grout. I would use sanded grout in that case because I'd want the correct size of the aggregate. Because I wanted and that would actually be appropriate for HO scale if you used a coarse grout. But I wanted the particulate size slightly larger. Due to some experimentation, it didn't look good, especially from any distance, if the granules were correct to prototype size. So my ballast is slightly oversized to make the aggregate look right, because you have to manipulate scale a little bit to make a convincing look, as opposed to what's exactly correct. In that case, I use leveling sand. It's a decomposed granite, decomposing granite, and I bust it up in a coffee grinder and sieve it to the correct size. But it's a medium gray in color, and I use white unsanded grout. So it's just in grout there's sand and pigment and Portland cement and a dry polymer adhesive, latex polymer adhesive. If you remove the sand, you've got the other three. And then I use that white unsanded grout to color that decomposed granite, and I add a bit of that dry latex polymer adhesive like you would use in a flooring compound. Mix that together to dry, put it on, brush it on, spray it with alcohol, and and it sets up hard as concrete, quite literally, because it has Portland cement in it.
So you're doing this for ballast?
I do. I didn't invent the technique for it. I copied it off of Mike Coffalo. That's what he was doing. I really loved the results. Couldn't argue with the results. I've modified it slightly.
And then he wonders why his cork goes so hard.
I don't use cork.
It's got cement on the top of it.
Haven't used cork since I was 14 years old.
Well, whatever. You're Homosote.
Oh, the Homosote holds up perfectly. It doesn't soak up at all. But I don't use any glue whatsoever.
I'm not talking about it soaking up. I'm just saying you got this layer of concrete on the top.
I mean, there is Portland cement, but it has latex polymer adhesive in it. It is somewhat flexible. It is rubber-ish. But it's hard to the touch. With no white glue. With no wet application of glue. So it's not messy.
All right, we're going to go with one last question here, and that's from Rock Island. Andy, how would you do up a gravel parking lot?
I like the regular grout, sanded grout, probably in white. Although you might want to mix a little bit in it, mix a little bit of gray in it. Or what I've done on some other cases is just add a little bit of dry tempera paint to it, just a little splash of black tempera paint. So I buy white grout and then I color it a little bit as I need to. But if you want to emulate gravel, you don't want that material to get wet because it smooths out, which is great for recreating tarmac, or as an asphalt. Soak it wet, it'll get smooth like grout. I've done tarmac or asphalt that way. What I would do is put down a full strength glue and then sieve it on. Use a little T sieve or T strainer and put the glue down wet, full strength, sieve it on so that it maintains the coarse texture like gravel would look. And then come back with some powders to kind of change the colors a little bit and weather it.
All right.
That's what I like the results.
All right, well, we pretty well ate up the hour and gone over just a tad, so that's fine. Well, I'll remind everybody that there's only one show next week because there's 5 weeks in this month. Yeah, they're killing me this year. They got 4 months. It's got 5 weeks in it. So, but don't forget, next week we're going to have a special host doing the Thursday night show. So that ought to get rather interesting too. So that'll be the 10 o'clock, just like tonight. It'll be posted up. So everybody have a good weekend, and we shall see you later.
Take care, John.
Yeah.
See ya.